from TNC China. Welcome everyone to join with us for the very inspiring talk today on the China recent research on NBS. So, good morning, good evening, everyone. I'm very happy to be here to moderate the panel today on nature-based climate solution in China. Before we started, a few message on housekeeping notes. So first, I would like to remind everyone that the discussion will last 1 hour. If you would like to direct any questions to our speakers, please enter them in the Q&A session so that for me and our colleagues can see this, and we will do our best to answer your questions live. Please note that the dialogue will be recorded and will be available on the ICCSD website after the event. So welcome everyone. As we all know, China made the commitment to achieve carbon neutrality by 2060, and will also host the Convention of Biodiversity COP15 in Kunming this year. It's very popular for everyone, to talking about the nature and climate now. And also, it's an emerging topic at the global level. People all discussing the nature climate solution. In China, we call it nature-based solution. So this, provides more opportunity for NCS in China. But of course, at the beginning stage, there will be a lot of challenges as the idea is not familiar to a lot of researchers or policymakers, so which bring also challenge down to the implementation stage. So in order to uplift the potentials of NCS as a cost-effective solution to tackle climate change, TNC China is entering into the strategic cooperation with 2 outstanding institutions in China. They are the National Centers for Climate Change Strategy and International Cooperation, we call it NCSC, and also the Institute of Climate Change and Sustainable Development at Tsinghua University. So today we are very, very honored and pleased to have the 2 distinguished panelists from NCSC and ICCSD. And also today, I would like to take the opportunity to share with everyone, all the participants, that TNC China recently launched a Chinese book, which trying to systematically unpack what NBS is, and also how to use NBS to tackle the different issues under sustainable development goals. And we hope this book can also bring up some awareness from the public. And also we are expecting more research and more, a very interesting funding based on our partnership with NCSC and ICCSD. Now, I would like to introduce our panelists. We have Dr. Gao Xiang. Gao Xiang is the Director of International Policy Research at NCSC. He has more than 10 years experience on climate change and energy policy. Now, he is working on climate change global governance, taking lead of more than 20 research program of National Nature and Science Fund. In 2019, he's a co-host of SBSTA of UNFCCC for the Masters of Paris Agreement. Gao Xiang, welcome you. And also we have Bingbing Wang. She is Assistant President for ICCSD. She has kept a close track on UNFCCC process since 2009 as a researcher, and also she's witnessed all the progress in China in the last years, that how China is working with the world to tackle climate change. So her new book, China Transition on Climate Communication and Governance from Zero to Hero, was just published by Sprint Nature this January. So Dr. Wang Last year, Dr. Wang initiated the C plus NBS platform with our team in China and also globally. So the intention of the C plus NBS platform is to mobilize more stakeholders and contribute to the success of COP15 and COP26. Bingbing, welcome you.
Thank you.
Yeah. And we have Dr. Christina McCann. She is Associate Director of Programs for the Climate and Land Use Alliance. Christina has focused her 20 years career on the conservation of tropical forest and more than a decade on advocacy around climate change and nationally and at the state level. So welcome you, Dr. Christina.
Thanks so much.
Yeah. So thank you, for your timing to join with us. We are very looking forward to hear from you, like what happened in China and also what can learn from China to better work with the world, and we uplift the NCS in the whole process to tackle climate change. Now, I would like to hand over to our panelist, Dr. Gao Xiang. It's over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Holly, and thank you for all the participants to join this very interesting, important event. So, under the support of the TNC last year, we start our research on the research on understanding the policies and the measures and the steps taken by China regarding to NBS. In fact, as NCSC is kind of a think tank, and we support the policy making in China, especially for the Ministry of Environment, Ecology and the Environment. So it is very important for us to understand what does the NBS mean and how to implement the NBS. Therefore, the research focus from our institute is a little bit different from Tsinghua University as well as TNC, but work together with hopes that, and we also believe we can contribute more to the Chinese government to implement the NBS. So for us, in fact, it's a learning by doing process. We feel that NBS becomes a hot topic, especially after the 2019, when China and New Zealand co-host the climate summit event under the United Nations. And right now, what we can see is that both the international treaties, under the international treaties like the UNCCC, the CBD, and also the international forum like the G20 are talking about NBS, how to make use of NBS to address different needs. So for us, after the discussion with experts and also with TNC and the other international bodies, we feel that the NBS is the concepts that focus on the nature conservation, also like they maintain the function of the ecosystem, and to sustainably make use of the natural resources. And so it is quite in line with our goal of the living in harmony with nature, and what is right now in China we pursue to achieve the eco-civilization. So what we think is that when we think about NBS, we need to think about what are these solutions. The solutions are for what? So for our understanding, the NBS is not only for ecosystem conservation, because if we just want to make the solution for this purpose, then we just say the ecosystem conservation. No need to mention the NBS. So in fact, for NBS, we think the most important role of the NBS is to have the comprehensive solutions for different perspectives. For example, the ecosystem conservation, of course, and also to address the climate change, and also like the energy security, food security, the supply of clean water, and so on. So the NBS provides a very important concept to guide the policymaker to think about this kind of close related issues altogether, and try to find a way which is good for the nature and also to meet the demands of the people. So in fact, NBS is a new concept in China. However, it is not a new thing in China, because when we look at the solutions, the typical solutions for MBS, most of them, or quite a lot of share of them, has been implemented in China for quite a long time frame. For example, one of the most important MBS is to plant trees and also to increase the forest coverage, both for the quantity and the quality. And in fact, this is kind of things very important, highlighted by China since the founding of the People's Republic of China. And the National Administration for Forest and Grassland has paid a very high attention to these things, and also for this Chinese government. All our peoples have this consensus that the tree planting is a very good thing, that both for the nature and for ourselves, and also to protect the environment, to reduce the air pollution as well as the climate change, because it's a very important source for the carbon sinks. So this is things we have make a lot of efforts to and achieved a great success on that. And also, for example, like the wetland conservation, like the mangroves in the coastal areas. This is something that recent years, I cannot say this is brand new. This is not as, this history is not as long as the tree planting, but I think at least for several decades, we have this kind of measures applied in the coastal areas. And also like the eco-agriculture, this is also very important in China. And I can still remember last time when I have a trip study in Henan province. There is a very large farm which implements the eco-agriculture. However, I think the eco-agriculture is also relevantly new thing in China, because from the first beginning we are facing the challenge of the food security from this founding of our nation. And during that time, we have to increase the food production. And also in the whole world, we have invented the chemical fertilizer, the pesticides, and also with the technology of the crops breeding, we have achieved a lot for the food production. And then we come back to consider about how to balance the needs of human and also the nature. We think that when we have the food security insurance, we should think about more about how to balance the needs of nature and the humankind. Then we focus, and many of the provinces and the local enterprises focus more and make more develop on the technology of the eco-agriculture. So this is relevantly new because we have to ensure the food security first, and then we have more energy and more focus on how to get a better quality for the food security. And also we have the policy on which we call the return farmland to forest and grassland, and this is also largely implemented across the country. And for the fishing industry, we also have the fishing off seasons since I think as the latest since 1999 in the South China Sea. We have started the fishing off season to use so this is in fact what we right now is kind of the nature-based solution to think about the nature and also at the same time to meet our demands. And also right now we have the 10-year ban on the Yangtze River area for fishing, just to try to restore the ecosystem of the Yangtze River. So in fact, we have made a lot of progress in the nature-based solution during the past decades without mentioning the name of the nature-based solution, these 3 words. But however, the things we are doing, and I think under the concept of nature-based solution, we can do better to live in harmony with the nature and at the same time to meet the demands of the people. I'll stop here. Thank you, Holly.
Thank you, Gao Xiang. So from, like your introduction, we got to know like in China is still, we are in the learning stage to really understand what is something new about NCS conceptually. And also we find out that there are a lot of things happen on ground. So we got to know what has been done from policy level and practical level. And the keywords I got to know is like how to make sure the harmony and the balance between people and nature. In the meanwhile, like we also noticed that, to really study the concept and discuss the implementation about NCS, we should not only focus on ecosystem. Let's see how to really, to scaling up this concept into the different sectors. So thank you for your sharing and your introduction, which is very helpful and interesting for us. And also now I would like to hand over to Mimi. As I mentioned in the introduction stage, last year, TNC China, we entered into the strategic partnership with ICCSD. And also, especially, the Mimi, your team did quite a lot to promote the NCS in China. So I'm going to hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Holly. Can you hear me?
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah. So very glad to join you this time. And as requested, I will introduce briefly about my organization and platform, and then share the updates from the C+ MBS. And I think we can open the platform to discussion, and I look forward to our hot discussion after a while. So about ICCSD. ICCSD was set up by Minister Xie Zhenhua. I think he's very famous around the world. And in 2017, he was retired from the Special Representative on Climate Affairs of China. So he got an international award, and he donated all the award honors to Tsinghua University and set up a special fund. And use this special fund, he set up Institute of Climate Change and Sustainable Development to see how to keep the momentum, especially in that during that special time on the I think it's the Trump time from the US side. So it's a threat for the global climate governance, how to keep the momentum. And this is ICCSD's mission to call on the multi-stakeholder to stick on and to see how to implement the Paris Agreement. And we have three dimensions of our working: dialogue and exchange, strategic research, and education and training. So I will give one case for each. So the first one is exchange. So in 2019, we set up this new mechanism. It's a high-level dialogue of Friends of Paris Agreement. Minister Xie called back all his old friends who contribute to the Paris Agreement in 2015, and they gathered together to talk about how to maintain and also how to promote the pathway, how to promote the implementation of the Paris Agreement. So this is the first time, and last year during the pandemic, we organized the second round, and around 30 senior officials, they joined this online event, and their discussion have been summarized and shared with the UN Secretary General. And I think the chair summary will contribute to COP26 directly. And our strategic research, just one example, in 2019, we organized around 20 frontline institutes and think tanks, and focus on the research to see the strategy and the strategies and the transition pathways for China's long-term low-carbon development. And is one of the key scientific support to President Xi's announcement on carbon neutrality of China. And for education, Tsinghua University initiated the Global Alliance of Universities on Climate, GOC, in 2019. And so far, there are 15 universities join us, including UC Berkeley. So about C+ MBS platform, why we ICCSD set up this platform? The main course is because China got the leader role, shared by UN and in 2019, and we sent our delegation to UN and joined the New York summit. And at that moment, we thought MBS is a new discourse, and it's very, especially, it's very fresh in the China context. How can, but China got the leadership role asked by UN. How to play the leadership role is a question mark in our mind. And of course, in the traditional way, we can conduct the literature review. But this time, we think if we only focus on the past, what happened in the past, maybe it's not enough, because this is a new topic, and especially during the COVID-19, everyone have to stay at home, but the topic is still there, the discussion is still there. So how can China, set up a bridge between China and the world? How to make sure China can contribute to this global topic? And this is why we set up this C+ MBS platform. C here means one is China, one is climate change. And as we understand, MBS comes from climate change discussion. But after that, more ecological scientists, they join this discussion and they feel very excited. But climate change simply disappeared from this discussion. So how to combine and how to drag the climate change scientists back to this discussion, we think it's very important, and the synergy between climate change and ecology is important. And the MBS is a chance, an opportunity for the scientists to step out from the silo and cooperate on this new field. And thus, as Huo Li said just now at the very beginning, this MBS topic can contribute both COP15 and COP26. So we organized the online monthly workshop. The first three workshop is closed door only, open to the domestic audience, because at that moment we think it's important to test their feedback, and especially the multi-stakeholders in China. But after that, when we learn from the discussion that they all look forward to learn about what happened outside, so we open this platform to the international attendees, to the international guests, and we invite the guests from UN, from international organizations, and from private sector to communicate with the Chinese audience, with the Chinese guest, to say how to initiate more cooperation. And when President Xi announced the carbon neutrality goal, we invite the expert from ICCSD to explain what it means, the carbon neutrality goal related to MBS, how MBS can contribute to this goal. And this workshop attracts 120,000 attendants. And then we were invited by Countdown to say, as a TEDx ICCSD, this is the new branding to cooperate with C+ MBS, and thus we can contribute the discussion in China to more international audience. And at this time, we invited many young students, use the GOG platform, invite the young students to join the discussion and introduce MBS to them. And some of the institutes, they have very creative idea, like the sludge brick is very interesting. It's different from the traditional discussion on MBS. And the last workshop last year is the one we cooperate with the Wealth and also supported by TNC. Why I highlight this one? Because this annual meeting, we look back what we discussed the whole year, and this monthly workshop was guided and supported by the executive committee for CBD COP15. It means our voices was heard by the government, and our advice, our policy briefings was accepted by the government as well. So it's one of our targets, one of our strategy to see how to use this kind of monthly workshop to collect the information and share the information, update the information to the government, and show it's kind of a lobby to see how to persuade or how to advocate the government to accept MBS. So this is what we did in the last year. And you can see sometimes when we talk about workshop, we think, well, it's just some events. But from ICCSD's perspective, we think this kind of monthly workshop is a kind of dynamic research method. It means a creative methodology. It's not only study or conduct this kind of research on the literature, but conduct the research on the fact, on the realistic update. So we think we can get the updated information and conduct research based on not only literature, but also on what happened now, and then look forward to the future based on this kind of materials, this kind of latest information. So we will release 2 reports very soon, and one is focused on what we got from the discussion, from the literature, and then another one is the global cases we collected from the monthly workshop. And we hope we can, incentive more discussion in the future, especially this year, because both COP was postponed to this year. It's a big year, it's a super year. And how can we use MBS as a new bridge? And especially, MBS is 2 years ago already was initiated by UN. Then how to keep the momentum, how to call on more people to talk about MBS and use MBS as a bridge to contribute to the success of COP15 and COP26. So this is the new task in head of the C+ MBS platform, and we change our strategy. And from this March, we open this platform to more multi-stakeholder, and we'd like to, not only take the flag, and we share the flag with the multi-stakeholders, just to show our support role, to support more discussion, more events, cooperate with more multi-stakeholders to deepen this topic. Yeah, that's my sharing.
Thank you, Bingming, for the very wonderful sharing. And also, it's very, very impressive to know that the C+ MBS has really generated a huge impact in the community, both in China and also to the world. I got and also we got better understanding of the history of ICCSD and how the C+ MBS, the idea, the topic is emerging here. The keywords that I get from your presentation is a bridge. First, let's see, NCS or NBS is a bridge between climate change and biodiversity. Secondly, why China wants to promote this idea on NCS is also to bridge up the China experience to global level. The thirdly, I think this C+ NBS is a very innovative and the interesting bridge between TNC, UC Berkeley, CCCI, at Tsinghua ICCSD, so that so many very, very smart ladies or gentlemen, of course, and researchers and practitioners, we can come together. So really appreciate what you have mentioned. And also we look back what happened in the world, and also got some innovation here with all the partners to see what can be what can be done in a innovative and new way. So thank you for that. Now I would like to hand over to Dr. Christina. And so I know you have a lot of global experience. So we really want to see listen from you what you hear today, and how what we learn here in China national level can also better communicate with the world, globally, America, all the countries, all the people love nature and want to do something for climate change. So can you share with us some of your comments? Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you, Lily. And I want to thank also the California China Climate Institute for having me. And it's a pleasure to be here with such distinguished colleagues from China, and to learn about the C+NBS platform, and to learn about the beginning of China's thinking and experience with respect to this topic, nature-based solutions, that really has sort of exploded in the public and the policy dialogues lately. And so, yes, I think my comments will echo what Gao Xiong shared in terms of some of these approaches, and this knowledge is not necessarily new. These are a lot of things that in some ways have been implemented for a long time, but obviously nature-based solutions as a topic, and in particular nature-based climate solutions, has really just been everywhere over the past couple of years, with a dramatic increase in attention at the high-level policy, level in meetings, but also from the public, from the media, from corporates interested in investing in climate solutions. And so I think I just want to share that I think there's a couple of factors that have to do with that seeming explosion of that topic. And one is about, very focused on climate change, is the urgency to act, right? The public is more aware than ever about the urgency of climate change, the fact that those impacts are really upon us. They're in 2019, as Gao Xiong mentioned, the focus of the co-hosted meeting and the topic of NBS in 2019, that same year, where it was the year of those massive Amazon fires, that the images sweeping across the world, people not focused on environmental and climate spaces, but just seeing the tremendous impact of those fires. Similarly, the forest fires in Indonesia that year, it created a huge awareness, as well as the impacts that we were all feeling of climate change, right? It really feels like it's here on our doorstep. And not only the public, but I think also policymakers who have not necessarily been focused on environment in the past are really feeling that urgency to act. And when we look out at the targets set for 2020 and 2030, it feels very different to be sitting in 2021 and looking at those targets and looking at what we have to accomplish. And there is a tremendous sense of urgency. The second thing I think is a really important factor there is also the data-driven case for nature-based solutions has gotten stronger and stronger. And my background obviously is focused a lot on land use and forests. And so a lot of my awareness that comes from there. But the data-driven case that shows us that we there's tremendous potential to mitigate climate change through conserving and managing, for example, forests and other natural lands, as well as restoration, right, of lands that have already been degraded or destroyed, and that there is a need to, we absolutely have to deal with land use change in order to stay below 2 degrees or 1.5 degrees to meet our targets. We have to address changes in land use, and we have to increase the removals from lands in order to be able to get there. That's very clear. And the co-benefits of a lot of nature-based solutions, and it's not all focused on climate, a lot of it focused on ecosystem services. And we've known for a long time that that ecosystem services are incredibly important to human well-being. And we've known for a long time, and we've discussed at the UN for over a decade now, the importance of forests in the climate change equation. But I think the cross-sectoral view on the co-benefits is also only growing. So the UN International Research Panel, the IRP, released a report this year just on land restoration and looking at the impacts of land restoration on the SDGs, and found essentially a relationship between land restoration and all 17 of the Sustainable Development Goals. So I think that case is building as well. In the case of forests alone, right, are already a net sink of 5 to 6 gigatons of carbon a year, and there are estimates that we could increase that dramatically by changing land management. So the co-benefits and the climate benefits are absolutely critical, and they're here, and that's the opportunity. But that does come along with some challenges, and I think, again, since these are not all new solutions, but it is a question of changing the way that we approach policymaking and financing and implementation, and taking a whole systems approach, and that is something that takes a little bit of time in terms of the way that we go about making policy, the way that we go about approaching doing systems change at government levels. I think cross-sectoral cooperation and collaboration across the finance ministry, across the agricultural ministry, across the environment ministry is a challenge, and it's not something that always has occurred naturally, but NBS and nature-based solutions and climate change in and of itself really does require that kind of cross-ministry collaboration. But I think it can be really demonstrated what the benefits to the interests of all those individual sets of decision makers and considerations are. I think the other challenge is, is scaling some of these solutions, right? And bringing solutions that we know work to scale and doing that thoughtfully. So, two pieces of the climate solution when it comes to natural lands, for example, one is conserving and managing what we have, and the other is, restoring what has been lost or degraded. And those are different sets of challenges and considerations that come along with each one of those. So I think, it's not a quick process necessarily to bring folks together to talk across sectors, to prioritize all the different types of interventions. Climate change is one of those urgent issues where there is finance, where there are clear goals, and that can really drive that conversation cross-sectorally, as it has in many cases in the discussion around tropical forests and reducing emissions from deforestation and degradation, for example. But there are also important considerations for different sectors acting in this space. Consultation is also an important and slow process. Impacts on human well-being, on communities, are also a key consideration in developing those policies and programs. And I think the other challenge is about financing and prioritizing investment, right? And really viewing investing in nature-based solutions as not something that is competing with other priorities around health or education or other, and the economic interests of the human population, but also something which long-term and in a whole systems approach is really, it is investing in a strategic and a holistic manner. And so that is a new conversation. So I would say China is learning, we are all learning about this broader discussion of nature-based solutions to climate change, which I think goes beyond just talking purely about carbon and the carbon benefits of preserving or restoring certain ecosystems, and really is a much broader conversation in which many other jurisdictions are learning right alongside each other. So a couple of examples that I just wanted to give really are focused on tropical forests programs. And when I was talking about scale, you know, implementation of programs for reducing deforestation emissions, for example, or something that's been discussed at the UN, as I said, for over a decade. And so that's something where there have been a lot of national level discussions about how to implement programs that reduce deforestation and degradation of forests at scale. And there, I think, is a lot of experience in that space that can be very instructive in terms of how to design national scale programs focused on carbon, but also with important other ecosystem and human co-benefits, one in which there is complex potential for impacts on livelihoods and forest dwellers. And those lessons in terms of how to carefully construct those programs at national level, I think, could be really important models for the broader NBS discussion as well. So, you know, experience that I have had with the construction of national level policies in Mexico, for example, Indonesia has just gotten results-based payments for reducing deforestation through REDD+ in 2020, and had dramatic reductions in deforestation levels over the past several years. Costa Rica, for example, is a country that also has a payment for ecosystem services program that goes beyond just focused on carbon benefits, but also on other ecosystem and biodiversity benefits as well. And those broad scale policies and the construction of those, I think, can be important models for how to move forward.
So thank you, Dr. Christina. So what I shared is also quite, thanks for the very deep reflection. And we got to know that, before start the implementation from the, there was still a lot of challenges. I think a global level, how to scaling up and implement NCS projects, especially focus on land and forest sectors, as it will create a lot of co-benefits together with like a carbon sequestration, this kind of effects. But we all know like it's also challenging to measure the co-benefits, but still it's the right time and to see how to convincing the policymakers and how to to design some programs that can attract more investment and make sure, the tropical forest and also the other very valuable nature resources will be better protected, as we see so many the wildfires and the tropical forest is dimensioned in these years. So I think your speech gave me some idea that China, what happened in China, and how we communicate, how we work with the policymakers to break up the silos, to do something innovative, we also benefit the world, and we can, learning together. Thank you for that, very interesting sharing. And now, I see we prepare some questions for our panel, and in the meanwhile, in the chat box, there are some questions. So let's start from Bimbi. We are very impressed about the C+ NBS platform. We know it well. It receives a lot of participants right now. So from your level, can you share with us some, opportunity for NCS now, both in China and globally? So let's listen from you. What is your observation in the future?
Yeah. So I think from the climate change perspective, of course, the carbon neutrality trend is a new opportunity for NBS. And NBS is one of the methodology or one of the strategy to reach the carbon neutrality. So we can think about how to make good use of the potential of nature, and to say, as Christina said just now, it's a new conversation and we are all learning about NBS. So how to contribute from different perspective, I think is an open window for scientists and multi-stakeholders from different fields to contribute your ideas. And nature, I think, is a current category when we talk about NBS, talk about nature, is not enough. Because you can see wetland, forest, lake, say, when we talk about this, if we call it nature, it's only one category from use, from function, and any other potential we can think about nature. I can give you an example. There is a private sector in China. Their company use solar power to electrolyze water and then use water to produce hydrogen. So you can see the resources is from nature, from solar, from water, and then produce new energy. So does it also related to nature-based solution? I think yes, but there are still some discussion about it's not the traditional way we think about nature-based solution. And when I organized the monthly workshop last year, I also have this kind of a question mark, what NBS is. So I called my colleague in UN, Eleni. She worked in the UN team in 2019 when UN invited China to join this NBS campaign. So I asked her, do you think NBS is limited to the traditional discourse? And she said, yes. Similarly, most of the time when we talk about NBS, we think about the carbon sink, and then we fall into a trap, it's made by ourselves. But why UN want to talk about NBS? Why so many scientists feel interested in NBS? It's because we want to dig out the real potential of nature. So the key word of NBS is nature. And when we think about from this way, we will see, wow, the door is open and there are many other new opportunities and new potentials to see how to, from which perspective, any new opportunities to think about or to contribute to this discourse, to the current discussion, global discussion. So I think this is the opportunity because everyone now, different countries, they are thinking about how to reach the carbon neutrality future, right? As Christiana Figueres, the former Secretary General of UNFCCC, said in her new book, human now face to the two futures. The one is if we continue the current roads, then it's a dark future. But if we choose the carbon neutrality, it's a green future. And we need to reach that future. How? So we need to standing in the future point and then look back and to see any new opportunities to think about nature-based solution. So this is the opportunity I can see.
Thank you. It's always very full of passion and inspiration every time when we're talking about the NBS, because so many challenges. Sometimes I have to say it's very depressing. But thanks God that we have the so much privilege to work with the world top scientists, and also all the practitioners from China, from America, from the world. We really, as you mentioned, to look at the nature. What is the core part? What is the spirit of nature? And then think the other things like the carbon things, and also including climate risk things. As I see some questions being posted in the chat box to talking about the wildfires on the forest protections, but also we see more and more future, in the future, the trend of the wildfire risk will be increased more or less in China or, in America. Who knows that how we handle this? I'm not sure, today we can answer this question. Christina, do you want to have a try?
Sure, I'm happy to. I mean, with anything, with it really, how you manage that risk precisely, I think, depends on what policy and what you're managing it for. If we're talking about looking to forests, for example, in California to have carbon gains, then wildfires, of course, they always have happened. They're going to continue to happen, and climate change, we know, is going to increase the severity of that. So one thing is that, essentially the management of, there's a feedback loop there, right? The more forests we lose, and the more it's contributing to climate change, the hotter the environment, the less water, the more prone to forest fires. And so I think the fact that forests will burn in one place or another, and that we're going to continue to see that risk, doesn't mean that we should not be addressing the lands as a climate change mitigation strategy. It means that we need to plan for that risk. We need to be aware of the fact that those fires will happen. But when you're looking at what the potential is for mitigation across natural and working lands at China, that is a part of it that's going to be factored in. I think this was one of the points that I wanted to connect earlier, is that when you're talking about the carbon piece of nature-based solutions, accounting is critical, right? You need to do that accounting in a holistic way, in a whole systems way, so that you're looking at the carbon loss through the loss of forest, through natural and unnatural losses of forest, as well as the regrowth and the conservation and the management of forests, so that you have, forests are a net sink and can continue to be a net sink, but we have to work on both ends of that equation, both protecting what we have, regrowing forests that have been lost, and the accounting at that whole system scale is really key to knowing what the carbon benefits that you're attaining in spite of the risks, and the reality that those things will continue to happen.
Thank you, Christina. And here I would also have another questions to Gaoxiang. As we know, there were opportunity and challenges. Our partners in China and American did quite a lot of job. So here, together with Gaoxiang's team from NCSC, we did some research. And Gaoxiang, can you share with us your reflections to see with China's commitment on carbon neutrality by 2060, and also, our next 5-year plan? Do you think how, we continue the mainstreaming or find opportunities for NCS in China from policy level?
Thank you, Huali, for the question. And I think from the perspective of the policy making, there are several, in fact, contradictions to implement NBS. First is about whether we pay more attention to the concept of NBS, or we say that we use the name of NBS, or we focus more on the entity or like the actions are going to take. This is very important to the policymakers to think about. And also, the second contradiction is, in fact, what's just previously being mentioned, whether we limit the NBS into the traditional concept that is the ecosystem ecosystem conservation, or we have the more broader concept like the how to sustainably use of the renewable resources. This is another thing. And the third one is whether we wish to have the integrated policies, which means that maybe we are going to establish a leading ministry or mechanism to overarching the NBS policy, or we wish the different ministries to take their own policies within their jurisdiction. I think there are several roles that the easier way, from my perspective view, that we take this concept of NBS in a broader way, and in line with our ecological civilization, and then we implement the NBS-related policy and measures within different ministries. However, we can have a discussion like the forum and also like the a policy coordination mechanism, and then we can also have a broader view of the NBS, including like the sustainable use of the renewable energy. Then in such a way, I think the NBS can contribute more to the Chinese targets, both for the peaking and also for the carbon neutrality. Thank you.
Thank you, Gao Xiang. I hope like you can catch up your train. And yes,
that's fine. That's
there
fine.
are, you know, like because the time is very limited, and I see a lot of interesting questions has been posted in our chat box, but unfortunately, we cannot manage to answer all. But together with, you know, our team from TNC and CCCI, we will trying to like share with you more feedbacks, or you know, there will be, you know, like a number of interesting events in the following up months. So that we will discuss different topics such as like, you know, the biodiversity and also how to bring up climate and biodiversity more systematically or innovatively. Before I announce, you know, trying to wrap up the event, I really want to appreciate the great support from, you know, our three distinguished panelists, and also, you know, our colleagues from UC Berkeley, CCCI, and TNC California and TNC American office. Without your support, we cannot be here and we cannot make such a great, successful event. Thank you for all your support. And Joy, do you mind like to post the event announcement for the next round? Thank you. Yes, perfect timing. So you can see like there will be, as I mentioned, there's a number of serious events. So next time, you know, like around, we will talk about linking biodiversity and climate NBS goals. Hope, you know, the event will be hosted in May next month, and more information can be found out in UC Berkeley's website. And we wish to see you next time. And also, like I really wish everyone has a nice evening, nice day, and enjoy the time with your family. Thank you.
Thank you, Holly. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Christina.
Thank